the names of the officers involved within 10 days. And again, we said they just now recently released that. So we want to make sure that their names are released a lot earlier than later. And then last but not least, names of victims, suspects, or their families, employers, etc. should not be released to the public or the media until such time as the public and the media have the names of the officers. So we're saying when you release the officer's name, go ahead and release the victim's name at the same time. I mean, you are building a jury. We want to make sure that you have a jury pool. When you've already put the child's name out there, or the victim's name out there for that matter, and anything else relating to the family, and then we don't get the police names until months later, you've already tainted, which I know is intentionally, but you have tainted the minds of your jurors for this person. So this law that will be then, after they get 400,000 signatures plus, will then be taken up to Sacramento, where they can find a legislator who will be able to adopt this and begin to write law. Look, this is not any different than the 3 strikes you're out. This is what Mike Reynolds did right here. His daughter came from Fresno, and she was killed from the men who were just released hours. And he got so upset, and rightly so, that he went and wrote this law. And 3 strikes you're out. And today, that law has caused so much impact to the black community and people of color, because that law has been in effect even where if you've gotten picked up on the first law, you go ahead and you steal some chewing gum or whatever on the second side. By the time you've got 3 strikes, you're in for life. Now, if we have allowed such a law to go through, then the Delham Nobles family has a right to get a law out. And so please go behind this, meet with them, see if anything can be added or subtracted. But again, get on their newsletter and support this. What's good for them will also benefit us at the end of the day on that. So thank you, Reverend Harris, for sharing that.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that information. We're going to go ahead and transition for the last 15, maybe 20 minutes here of the show. This is a Rolling Stone article that came out last week. Says last Friday, San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick refused to stand for the national anthem during a preseason game against the Green Bay Packers. By Saturday morning, what should have been a meaningless football game was dominating the national news. He said, quote, "I'm not going to stand up to show pride in the flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color." He said that his decision not to stand was not to start a protest, but yet to raise awareness. And until there's significant change, he feels that the flag, he said, "I feel like the flag represents, he feels that it represents what it's supposed to represent, and this country is representing people the way that it's supposed to, then he'll stand." And I thought this article was a good article to bring up, because it also says that while black men only make up 6% of the American population, they comprise a staggering 70% of NFL rosters. However, their power is mainly found on the field, since there are currently no African Americans who are a majority owner of any team, and no African American CEOs or presidents. The majority of NFL players are black, while the NFL fan base is 83% white, and 64% male. There are people who pay staggering amounts of money to watch black men who have their bodies battered on the field. As long as they run and tackle, keep their helmets on, keep their mouths shut, then they are acceptable to the white mainstream public. However, when black athletes choose to point their aggression not towards each other, but to a larger systemic inequalities, then the backlash begins. Dr. Kennedy?
That's a powerful article. We know in the last few days how we've had such an uproar about this young man standing up, and I know this is a conversation we're all going to get involved in the last few minutes. Someone sent me a text, and I've got to read it because it goes along with this. This is a young man who is the only African American in his professional field in this particular area of his job. And he says he's been listening to all of this conversation, and he has his opinions. He wants to talk about this. But he knows that if he does, he's going to be looked upon, that he's not a team player in his own area. So not only is he the only African American person in that particular unit of his job, but he cannot also speak out his own opinion, because it's become so fashionable now for the dominant culture to say, oh, you're not a team player because you don't agree with us. And this young man sent me this text, and I think it's so appropriate. He says, I just thought of something, Dr. Kennedy. It might be old, but it's new to me, because he himself is trying to learn about his own identity. He says, because it just hit me that there is a double standard in most. It's a very subtle form of racism. This double standard is a very subtle form of racism and oppression without just blatantly yelling it out. He goes on to say, it's also the most powerful because it's the easiest to deny when it is happening. And I thought this is exactly what we're seeing with Colin. He has made a statement. He chooses to handle himself the way he has. We understand it, but it seems like he's being owned. Even though he's playing, he's an entertainer. They're telling him that he cannot say what he wants to say or have an opinion. When you hear everybody else who's speaking against him, and yet they're representing their organizations. I'm hearing radio media hosts going against what he's saying, but are you not representing your radio station? And so when you think that he's out of line, he's a racist, he's stupid, he doesn't know what he's saying. I'm just quoting the terminology that I've been hearing recently. Are you not? Even police chiefs from some areas, even the associations of police associations, their presidents are tuning in on this, because obviously they don't like his reason for talking about the police with their brutality and the way they've been handling themselves. So again, it is a double standard, and it is a subtle form of racism when we are not allowed to let our feelings be heard and how we feel. It is a subtle form of racism, ladies and gentlemen. If we cannot be acknowledged for the way we feel about issues, right or wrong, it is a subtle form of racism, and it is oppression in every sense of the word. Let us not be guilty. When we hear about this young man, whether you agree with him or not, black, white, or green, don't you be guilty of having a subtle form of racism or oppression simply because you think he shouldn't be talking that way because he's in uniform. Everybody else gets to do it. He ought to have the right to do it also.
I don't think it's just because he's in uniform, because I've heard this statement saying he makes $60 million a year. And people need to understand, even if you make $60 million or you like Oprah make $1 billion, you're a billionaire, you're still subject to racism.
Yes.
And it's still a problem even no matter how much money you have. And they equate money with treatment, and it's not that. I mean, it's different. So when he gets up there, and ever since the police incidents and the Black Lives Matter march, it hasn't been covering the airways lately. And the fact that he did a protest and didn't stand for the flag, they went and asked him why not, and he is back up again. I'm not doing it because it's unfair treatment of black people or people with color. It needs to change. If you want me to stand for this national anthem, then you need to treat black people accordingly. It needs to be some fair treatment. And don't get mad and say I'm unpatriotic. You're unpatriotic for not recognizing that there's mistreatment going on and not doing anything about it.
I mean, and not only that, you know, as black folks, you know, it doesn't matter how much money we make or what position we hold, we have the right to speak for those who don't have the voice to speak for themselves.
Sure.
It doesn't matter if, you know, I'm pretty sure every black person in America has faced some racism. I know I have. So I have the right to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. If we're in a position, if we have a platform, and not only a right, some believe, as I do, we have a duty to speak for
Yes.
those. So for people to say, oh, what are you complaining for? You're first class, you're this, you're that. Come on. If that's the mentality. Our mentality is a collective mentality. It's not a single, oh, I'm all right, so I don't have to worry about everybody else. No, that's not the way we think. And that is the very difference that other communities don't recognize.
And they set this young man up for failure because now he is being labeled as not being a team player. He's being labeled as, you know, not going along with them, and so he's being put out there. Damn if he doesn't, damn if he doesn't. He'll go out there to play a game. You don't know who the other people are that are going to play along with him that could injure him in